Well, you hear that sound, you know what time it is. Welcome, everyone, to episode 9 of the True Crime All the Time podcast, an EMASH digital production. This is part 2 of the Scott Peterson story. As always, I've got my sidekick, Gibby, here with me. Gibby, what's up?
What's happening, man?
Not much. I'm ready to do this part 2 on Scott Peterson.
It's going to be pretty fun, man.
He's
exciting.
He's a fascinating...
He's a prick.
Yeah, he is a prick, but he's a fascinating character to talk about for sure.
It's definitely going to be interesting.
So let's do a couple shout outs. Actually, we got a few shout outs today. We got Cookie Gal on Instagram, said some very nice things about the show, and we always appreciate that.
Thank you, Cookie.
Chris from Facebook, he gave us some great future episode suggestions, and I think he's down Cincinnati way, so he's pretty close to us.
Yeah, neighbor.
And then we got Rammer from Twitter. He's been lighting it up lately.
Like Rammer, man.
We like Rammer. I'm saying Rammer, even though there's an @ sign, there's an E in there.
Just sounds cooler to say Rammer.
I think that's what he was going for. As always, visit our website at truecrimeallthetime.com for all of our contact info. You can help support the show for as little as $2 a month through our Patreon button. That help is greatly appreciated. In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, caught in a lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. You know, my wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. So, Gibby, we're on to part 2 of Scott Peterson.
Yeah.
I think to start this episode, what I want to do is hear from Scott himself again in an interview that he did, I want to say about maybe a month after the disappearance of Lacey. Just because I find it fascinating.
I don't care what people think of me. You know, as I've said, question my moral character if you want to. But look at your heart, think of Lacey, her picture, baby, and make the effort to bring her home. And that's a simple reality. That's a simple thing we need to do. Just, think whatever you want of me. As long as you're out there and you're comfortable with yourself, that you're doing what you need to be doing to find Lacey and bring her home.
I know that law enforcement officials have told me that you won't take a lie detector test, that you've wavered back and forth on that. Why?
Well, let me say this about the investigation. I gave you 2 times earlier, 9:30 and 10:30 when the dog was returned here. Investigators on both sides, law enforcement and private, have asked me not to comment anymore about times, about conversations I had with the police, about the possible polygraph, tests if I've taken it or not, and other, things surrounding the investigation so that it can be clear. So I'm simply not going to comment
on why
about
you have
those
to
things.
take it?
I'm not going to comment if I have or have not taken a polygraph with the police.
The life insurance policy, why take one out on Lacey? $250,000?
We have life insurance policies in place that were established when we bought this home that you're in right now 2 years ago. There was no life insurance policy taken out recently, as has been reported in the National Enquirer, the dubious source of alien information as well.
I know that a neighbor saw you removing things on the 24th. You mentioned this morning that it was umbrellas.
Yeah, we have some large umbrellas for the backyard pool area. Market umbrellas, I think is the term for them.
Why would you store those in the winter?
It started to rain, so I was going to store them. Just like you asked, why would I store them? I was taking them from the pool to store.
Okay. Officials of mine have told me, sources have mentioned to me, that there were cement bags that were in the storage area, and apparently a few of them were empty.
Sure.
Explain that.
Well, I could take you out in the backyard and show you all the cement work and brickwork that we've done to this home, and you'd find, cement bags around here.
So this was something that it was home remodeling, or what were you doing with the cement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, we're starting to go into areas that investigators have asked me not to comment about, so we should probably, simply put the brakes on at that point.
Okay.
I don't mind commenting about the life insurance policy, but I don't want to give specific times or other information that could jeopardize what they find is valuable information in finding Lacey.
Okay. Are you in any way connected to Lacey's disappearance?
I had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance. And again, even if people out there question that, if they would just look at their hearts and make the effort to bring her home to her family, I don't care what you think of me.
Sources of mine have mentioned that you also, when you came home on the 24th, did some laundry. You washed your clothes. Do you understand why that may look a little suspicious to the average person? Why would he come home and do his laundry?
Well, the average guy that goes out in the ocean fishing gets some salt water on him and comes home wet.
When it comes to traces of blood possibly found in his pickup, Scott says that's not a big surprise to him.
Well, take a look at my hand. You can see, cuts here on my knuckles, numerous scars. I work on farms. I work with machinery. I know I cut my knuckle that day.
On what day?
On Christmas Eve.
Doing what?
Reaching in the toolbox of my truck and then into the pocket on the door. I cut open my knuckle and there's a blood stain on the door.
At one point, Scott teared up when he talked about Lacey and the agony of the past month.
Do you think she's still alive?
She is.
You're sure of that?
Yes. Lacey's still alive. She's out there and someone's holding her, and these are critical days that we have left until the due date of February 16th. And we just need all of your help.
You haven't said anything about your baby.
That's entirely too difficult to speak about.
There was a couple of reasons, Mike, that I wanted to play that. And he talks about some of the things that are going to come into play later on. The life insurance, the cement bags, he says that he cuts himself on December 24th. So I thought it was pretty important to play that as we start this episode.
I thought it was kind of interesting how he said, I cut it on my, cut it that day. The way he said that, I cut my hand that day. Like, he didn't realize what he just said. Basically, to me, he's like, I cut it that day, the day that I committed the crime, but then he tries to cover it up.
And the other thing he talks about, washing his clothes when he got home. I don't know about you. That's not something I would do.
I wouldn't either. And I've been fishing many times.
You know me, I go fishing all the time.
Yeah.
I throw the clothes in the hamper and wash them with the rest of the clothes.
There's no sense of urgency.
We're dissecting his words, and it's very hard to do, but I wanted to play that. More importantly, let everybody listen to it and let them make of it what they will. So we've got to get on to what is probably the toughest part of this case. And the first part occurs on April 13th, 2003. And there's a couple walking their dog, and they come across a decomposing but pretty well preserved body of a late-term male fetus. And they find this on the shoreline of the San Francisco Bay. I guess it was north of Berkeley, but the significance, I mean, obviously the significance that they found this male fetus, which ultimately turns out to be Connor.
Right.
But the significance is that they found the place where they found Connor's body, or Connor's fetus, was pretty much the exact place where Scott had been boating / fishing the day of Lacey's disappearance.
Right.
That's definitely going to come into play.
Absolutely.
So the very next day, April 14th, a partial female torso is found, missing hands, feet, and head. It's just the torso, found basically in the same area. It was identified as Lacey. And as we talked about, the fetus was identified as Connor through autopsies. The decomposition, it was so, I guess, severe is the word I'm looking for, that they really could not determine the exact cause of death. The medical examiner noted that there were some broken ribs, but did not think that those injuries could have been caused by her body being dragged along the rocks. So basically what they're saying is they thought that those injuries had occurred somewhere else.
Right.
Prior to the body ending up where it did.
And I think they called out 3 broken ribs, right?
Yeah.
The 5th, 6th, and the 9th. And that's some pretty heavy trauma.
Yeah,
to break those 3 ribs.
Yeah. So this led the FBI and Modesto police to start searches. They searched the Peterson home. They searched Scott's truck. They searched the toolbox in his truck, his warehouse, and his boat. Boat is going to come into play big time during the trial. But, all of this searches, all of this circumstantial information is starting to build up, right, against Scott. There's no doubt about that.
And I find it interesting, Mike, there was a wiretap. It's Peterson's mom, Jackie, and she basically says something like to Scott, not even you, Scott, would be that stupid enough to dump, the bodies in the same locations where you went fishing. So surely that wasn't you. It was.
Oh yeah, ultimately, I mean, we're not letting the cat out of the bag.
Right. But here she is saying, surely you weren't that stupid, and they have it, record it that she had this conversation with him. And, of course, he denies anything, but I just find it interesting that conversation was had.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get into some of that, in a little bit. But if you're in a boat out in the middle, and I don't know if you ever watched the show Dexter, but that's how Dexter disposed of all of his bodies. Now, he did a much better job. He weighted them down, but ultimately they surfaced.
Was Dexter a active running show at that time back in
2003? I don't believe so. I want to say that Dexter ended 2 or 3 or 4 years ago and maybe ran for 6 years. It could have been.
I just didn't know if maybe that's where he got his.
It'd be interesting to look up.
I'm sure one of our T-Cats out there will let us know.
Yeah, we like it when they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just talk about these things so people will write in and give us the answer because we like it. So, like I said, all this circumstantial evidence is pointing in the direction of Scott Peterson, and he's ultimately arrested on April 18th, 2003, and he's arrested in kind of a strange place.
Yeah, kind of high end. I've been where he was arrested.
You're a world traveler. We talked about that last episode. The Torrey Pines golf course is
it's nice.
Is very nice. It's very expensive. Apparently, he was meeting his father and his brother for a game of golf, and that's where I guess they had a task force that converged on the golf course and
drive a Mercedes too, right?
Why wouldn't he?
I mean,
yeah,
sales must be good. Whatever in the fertilized business.
But what is crazy about the craziest part of the arrest?
It's bizarre.
is what he has in his possession. And we've got to go through it. I don't care how tedious it is, because it's just too bizarre not to.
I definitely find it strange.
So number one on my list is he has $15,000 in cash. I don't have $15,000 in cash, but if I did, I sure wouldn't be carrying it to the golf course.
I left mine in my car.
Did you?
Yeah. That's a good place to keep it.
I'll check that before you leave.
Above the visor.
He's got 4 cell phones.
Yeah. Not 1, not 2, but 4.
Right. I could understand 2, 1 personal, 1 business, but 4, you're getting into a weird territory. Multiple credit cards, not in his name.
So it makes me feel like the family knew and they were helping him get away.
Yeah, because these are in the names of his different members of his family.
Right.
He's got an array of camping equipment. He's got almost like prepper type stuff, things to warm up food, tents, tarps, water purification systems. I mean, we're not even halfway through, but you can already tell this is if I have to get away.
Well, sure, because the next item, 9 pairs of footwear. Not 1, not 2, not a pair of dress shoes and gym shoes, but he's got 9 different pairs of shoes, including flip-flops.
Gibby, I don't even know 9 pairs of shoes.
I don't either.
And if I was going on the lam, I sure wouldn't take them with me.
I maybe got 3 pairs if I count my slipper Mohican thingies.
Yeah, a real man only needs 3 or 4 pairs.
That's it.
Work boots. What else do you need? Yeah, he's got change of clothing, which that's probably not out of the ordinary. If sometimes I'll take a change if I'm going to play golf. He's got a T-handled double-edged dagger.
So he's ready for business if he's got to stab somebody.
A shovel, 2 ropes. Here's where it starts to get even more weird. He's got a MapQuest map. So this is back in the day before, you just pulled it up on your phone.
Right.
Remember, you had to go on the web and
print it out,
type in the address and print out the actual little color map. But he's got a MapQuest map to Amber Fry's workplace that somehow they were able to determine he had printed just the previous day. He's got 200 sleeping pills.
So he planned on doing some driving nonstop, right?
No, these are sleeping pills, not keep me awake pills.
This is to put you to sleep. This is to put him down.
Right. So he's either
going to put her down
or put himself down.
I'm thinking he's going to put her down, and then he's going to use the 12 pills that he's got for himself because he takes Viagra.
Well, right. He does have Viagra with him too.
That's Viagra. It had to be new right then, right? Viagra hasn't been out that long.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think you're onto something. If you add the MapQuest to Amber Fry's house or workplace, shovel, ropes, and sleeping pills.
Sounds like BTK.
Yeah, that's like a hit kit.
Yeah.
If we're going back to BTK. And then to top it all off, he's got his brother's driver's license. Did he steal that? Was it given to him
with the credit cards?
Right. We don't
his
know.
appearance has changed a little bit, right?
Definitely. He changed his hair and his goatee, and there's a lot of pictures out there. So we'll definitely throw some pictures up on all of our different outlets. But basically, he bleached him.
Yeah.
Right. He went like bleach blonde.
So he was doing everything to me, it sounds like, to evade potential arrest and maybe Amber, his third victim, right?
But he wasn't hiding.
No.
Right? He's not hiding. He's playing golf at Torrey Pines Golf Course.
Yeah. Well, and did they confirm that he was actually going to play, or was that just the meeting spot?
What I read said he was meeting his father and brother for a game of golf.
Right.
I don't think they
I read that too.
got that far.
Right.
But I assume he was going to play.
Interesting.
One thing that I found funny was when asked about the hair color, he had said something about that it was a result of chlorine from swimming in a friend's pool.
Really?
I don't know if you saw that or read that, but the owner of that pool later testifies that, to his knowledge, Scott Peterson had never swam in his pool or never used his hot tub or anything.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with pools and hot tubs, and I know
my hair never changed.
Yeah, it never
right.
changed.
Exactly.
So conveniently for him.
True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years. And I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. So after the arrest, the police have already done a lot of searches, but they continue to do some more searches. One thing that they do that's very specific is they're searching the bay where the bodies were found. And what they're looking for are handmade concrete anchors. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to play that clip, because in that clip, he talks, he's asked pointedly by the reporter about why there's so many empty bags of concrete. And so I'm assuming that they thought that was maybe something that he had done, was to make these concrete anchors to use to weigh down
the body, parts, pieces.
But they did not find anything. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but he's arrested, and we move on to the trial phase of the story. And, I think in the beginning, he shuffled around attorneys quite a bit. At one point saying that he was too poor to hire an attorney to represent him.
Yeah, I can see him being too poor. I mean, $15,000 on
driving the Mercedes,
cash with the Mercedes, 12 Viagra pills. Those are expensive.
But ultimately, he changes that.
Right.
And he does hire a very high-profile criminal defense attorney named Mark Garagos. And I don't know if you know who Mark Garagos is. The only reason I know of him is because he does a podcast with Adam Carolla, which I actually listen to on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And it's very good. They talk about legal things. And
well, he's that one attorney that he'll get some live phone calls.
Yeah.
Right? When he's doing this podcast.
He's very, very high profile. He's, I think he's represented Chris Brown and just a ton of stars. So he's a very high profile attorney, but Mark Garagos does take the case to defend Scott Peterson. Actually, I think he talked about it on one of the podcast's episodes. I'm sure he got a lot of flack for that. Normally any of the attorneys that sign on to represent, because we talked about it, right? At this point, Scott Peterson is probably the most hated man in America,
Absolutely.
if not farther,
Right.
out into the world. The story was such a big story. So I'm sure, Mr. Garagos got a lot of flack for that. And I think I remember him saying that he felt that it was his duty to, represent him, and I don't fault attorneys for that, right? That's a job that they're doing.
Right. It's the constitutional right.
Yeah. I mean, everybody deserves as good of an attorney as you can afford.
Yeah.
That's basically how the system works.
Right.
So another part of this is that, and we haven't talked about Amber Fry in a little while. We did so much of it in the first episode with all of her phone calls, but she's hot and heavy in the media as well.
Yeah, she's in the mix for sure.
And she retains Gloria Allred, who, is a very famous attorney in her own right. I'm not sure. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not sure. She probably needed an attorney at that point because she's involved in the case.
Right.
But in no way, I don't think was ever.
I think she just has to protect her interests.
Yeah.
And liability, what she says, civil suits later, things like that.
Probably more for guidance.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
And also just to protect, PR.
Yeah.
Try not to be the bad woman that messed with a married man and
she wasn't under
tell her story, right?
Yeah, she wasn't under scrutiny or wasn't thought to have had any part in this. But
correct.
So there's an interesting part about as the trial's going on because the judge, he does a couple of things. Number one, moves the trial out of Modesto to Redwood City, which that's pretty normal, right? For a case of this magnitude. Scott Peterson wasn't going to get a fair trial probably in Modesto. So that argument is usually pretty easy to make. And the second thing that the judge does is issues a gag order. That also, I think, is pretty common in some of these very high profile cases. The interesting part about it was Allred's not bound by that. The prosecutor is bound by that. Peterson's defense attorney is bound by that. So what ends up happening is you see Gloria Allred on the news nightly.
She's just blowing it up.
Oh yeah. She's just talking, but she's not saying that, he's guilty or he's not guilty. But I think her leaning was towards the prosecution.
And she's working the story.
Yeah. So we get into the trial. We're going to save a lot of the evidence talk for a little bit later in the show. Basically, it was prosecution stating that Scott Peterson murdered Lacey for a mix of money, I believe, and freedom, possibly to be with Amber Fry, is what I got from that. The issue is that they faced was there wasn't a lot of direct evidence.
Right.
What they had was a shitload of circumstantial evidence. I mean, they had a ton of it. We've already talked about a lot of it, and we'll talk about even more. But that's what this case came down to.
Right.
In a nutshell, circumstantial evidence. There really wasn't much in the way of, hardcore, like you would see on CSI that just
right. Locked the case up.
Locked the case up. It really wasn't that.
Book 'em, Dano.
Yeah. They didn't have that.
Right.
So now the defense, they hammered on the circumstantial evidence, basically saying that that's all there was. It's circumstantial. You can't convict beyond a reasonable doubt.
Is this when they brought in Donnie, the Donnie story? They had a theory that there was the killer was some man named Donnie that could be the possible killer. He was linked to the mysterious brown van. So I don't know if you saw that story out there or not, but that was one of the things that the attorney put out there to try to take the heat off of Scott and say, look, there's somebody else out there.
And that's a defense attorney's job, right?
Sure.
I think one of the other things that they threw out there was a suggestion that the fetal remains of Connor were actually full term, meaning he had been delivered and then killed.
This is the satanic.
Yes, this is when they offered up the theory that someone had kidnapped Lacey. They'd held her until she had given birth, and then they'd killed both Lacey and Connor. The defense has to throw out all these different theories to combat the prosecution's suggestions. And as you said, one of them was that a satanic cult had kidnapped Lacey, held her, killed. And the reason why they would say that is, obviously, if that were to be true and Connor is not killed as a fetus and he's killed as after he was actually delivered, that would change everything as far as the timeline.
Right.
Because they're going to go back and say that Scott killed her on Christmas Eve. The fishing was a cover up, all of that, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. All of these suggestions are meant to blow that up,
right?
The timeline. So basically what Garagos does is say, Scott's a piece of shit, not in those terms, but he's a cheater, he's a bad guy. All that's known, but what he's not is a murderer. So that was part of the defense. I think you and I talked a little bit earlier before we started the show about this is a weird jury. A lot of things happened.
Yeah, that's again, I think we were talking that, between the jury issues, I mean, that's a podcast itself if someone really wanted to go that deep into it, as is Amber Frey. I mean, that's a whole another podcast itself too, right? With everything that happened with her during and after the trial.
Right. So a couple of juries were removed during the trial. One of them was the foreman.
So jury number 5 got removed also.
I'm not sure what the number was, but the jury foreman being removed, that's
huge.
Yeah. And that one, that one jury was removed for misconduct. The jury foreman actually requested to be removed. So you don't see that a lot. But they were replaced by alternates, and the trial went on.
Oh, and jury number 5, he was caught on tape talking to Lacey Peterson's brother, which is
that's the misconduct.
That's a misconduct one. Yeah,
there was some reports that there were some threats made that may have prompted the foreman to kind of pull out. They go through the trial, and on November 12th, this jury that ends up deciding the case has some alternates. They ultimately convict Peterson of first-degree murder, and they add on the special circumstances, which is killing Lacey, and then with the second-degree charge for killing Connor, the fetus. The penalty phase of the trial began, so we're up to like November 30th now.
So we're really far along.
Yeah. And so that started on November 30th, concluded on December 13th, and the 12-person jury came back with a verdict of death. So they sentenced Scott Peterson to death. I shouldn't say they sentenced, the judge has to do that. There were a couple of things that I read that I kind of thought were strange, where the jury gave some statements in press conferences, and a lot of it centered around Peterson's demeanor. I know you and I have watched a lot of what's available out there online of his interviews, and I mean, we can only play the audio here, but if you watch him, his demeanor does not make him look good. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I think the jury relied heavily on that and the circumstantial evidence. There was some jurors that said, he showed no emotion. Phone calls to Amber Frey were a big deal. They thought, I think that circumstantial evidence was weighed really heavily against him. But when it really came down to it, They had no smoking gun, which we talked about before. So what they did is they used all these little pieces of circumstantial evidence that came out during the trial,
Right.
along with what we talked about as far as his demeanor and the way that he acted in the months after the disappearance. They used that to convict him. But there was a lot of circumstantial evidence.
Oh, absolutely.
No doubt. And, we're going to talk about it here in a minute. But I do want to play the verdict.
All right, this is the case of People versus Scott Peterson. Let the record show the defendants present with counsel, the jury's in jury box along with the alternates. And Mr. Foreperson, it's my understanding that the jury has arrived at a verdict in this case. Is that correct?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Now, will you hand the verdicts to Janae, please? All right, you want to read the verdicts? Start with this.
State of California versus Scott Peterson. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder of Lacey Denise Peterson in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, as alleged in count 1 of the information filed herein. Dated November 12, year 2004, foreperson number 6.
Mr. Foreperson, is that the unanimous verdict of the jury with respect to count 1?
It is, Your Honor.
Read the decree.
We, the jury, further find the degree of the murder to be that of the first degree. Debated November 12, 2004, foreperson number 6.
And juror number 6, is that the unanimous verdict of the jury with respect to the degree?
It is, Your Honor.
I want to read count 2.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder of baby Connor Peterson in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, as alleged in count 2 of the information filed herein. Dated November 12, 2004, foreperson number 6.
Is that the unanimous verdict of the jury with respect to count 2 of the information?
It is, Your Honor.
All right, you want to read the degree, please?
We, the jury, further find the degree of murder to be that of the second degree. Dated November 12, 2004, foreperson number 6.
And Mr. Foreperson, is that the unanimous verdict of the jury with respect to the degree?
It is, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to read the special circumstance.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find to be true the special circumstance pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, subsections A3, that the said defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and of one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree. Dated November 12, 2004, foreperson number 6.
So how nervous would you be, Mike, if you were the one that had to read that, knowing that the whole world is going to be listening?
I'd be pretty nervous.
Yeah, I definitely would too. So, Mike, we got to back up. I don't want to say back up, but we kind of chose to talk about the trial and then talk about evidence and motives and everything kind of on its own.
Right.
Instead of trying to weave it into the trial. To me, the evidence is very important as we're talking about this case. And we mentioned it. We mentioned mostly circumstantial evidence. I think at trial it was brought up that there was a single hair that was found in a pair of pliers that came from Scott's boat. It was thought to have been Lacey's, but right. I don't know that they ever, it was conclusive that it was hers.
And I think the tough part is, right, it's a husband-wife, and you can easily say, we always went fishing together.
Oh, yeah.
She was on the boat with me.
Her hair was on my shirt, and then it fell off in the boat.
Right.
And
she cast a line. She got a hook in her and made her bleed. It's easy to cover up a lot of the stuff, and it's hard for the prosecutor to use a lot of that. It's great for a defense because the defense can say exactly that. Their husband and wife, they loved to fish together. They did this together. They were in the boat. They were in the truck all the time. Sometimes she would go visit some of the farms with him and sit in the back of the tailgate. I mean, it's easy to wash over that kind of evidence.
I think you're absolutely right. If you're a perpetrator that murders somebody that you don't know and you've never been to their house,
Right.
that's a much different story than if maybe you don't even live there, but you're there all the time. It's a friend and you're there all the time. Your DNA or your skin cells or hair or whatever it is a little more natural for it to be there. So I agree with you on that. But what we really need to do is look at all of these different circumstantial pieces of evidence. In the first episode, you talked about the Scott adding 2 pornographic television channels.
Right.
Days after his wife's disappearance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he didn't waste any time.
Is that a smoking gun? No.
I just find it,
It's odd.
Yeah, it is odd. I mean, your wife's missing,
And you're thinking about porn?
and you order 2 porn stations.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think you and I have talked about it. This whole case, and in particular, Scott's actions, they're just bizarre at almost every turn.
I think it's weird, especially when you hear the Frey tapes. Just to listen to him talk to her, to me, it's bizarre. The ordering the porn, bizarre.
Yeah, because the prosecution used that to suggest that Scott knew that she wasn't coming home.
Right.
Because you and I both know you're not gonna add porn to your cable lineup if your wife's on her way home.
Exactly.
And is going to see the bill or accidentally turn to that channel. Or
Right. So he knew. I mean,
they used that against him to say,
sure, you knew she was never going to see the cable bill.
Right.
You ordered this for your pleasure. I mean, and there's reports, like December 9th, he told Amber that his wife was gone.
We touched on that in the first episode.
Yeah.
All of that stuff with Amber telling, basically fabricating stories to her, telling her that his wife was gone. Apparently he had expressed to some people interest in selling the house.
Right.
Fairly,
Early on.
Early on. This is before they even knew what I think had happened.
And just listening to him, acting like he was in Paris when he was at the vigil.
I think he sold her Land Rover.
He sold the Land Rover. And I think he made the comment at one of the news outreach, something about that we just have to realize that she's probably just gone now. Instead of doing the help find her, we need her. She's still out there, alive. And, he makes the comment to one person that it's probably she's gone.
Which is crazy because you and I both know that if our wives were missing, at no point, 10 years down the road, maybe, or however many years down the road, do you have to at some point give in and say, something bad has happened. I may never know what it is, but we're talking about a month, days, months.
Yeah. I mean,
that just doesn't
within days, weeks. I mean, he's acting like she's gone.
Right.
Never coming back.
Is that because he already knows that she's gone?
Absolutely is what I would, if I was
obviously that's what the jury thought.
Yeah. And I would too, right? If I was sitting on that jury, I would think you had zero hope that she could have still been. Your actions reflected that you had zero hope, and to have zero hope, and we know you're this terrible person. You're this out screwing different women and saying bad things about your wife, but still to have zero hope that your unborn child and wife is nowhere to be found, and you're basically giving up. I don't know. It just tells me.
It doesn't compute.
Yeah.
To me, and obviously it didn't to the jurors. I mean, the prosecution, I think, laid on the taped phone calls, which we played a lot of in episode 1. They laid heavily on that, and I'm sure that swayed or meant a lot to the jury. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT. thrivemarket.com/TCAT. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT.
All these circumstance evidence that you heard, what do you think was the biggest key piece of evidence? What solidified it for you?
I don't know if I can point to one, but I'm gonna say the fact that he chose to go fishing on Christmas Eve when his wife is 8 months pregnant. Number one, I don't know how many guys would do that. You're not spending time with your wife on Christmas Eve. You choose to go fishing. And then the fact that he did that, and then her body, as well as his unborn son's fetus, was found in the same area that he went fishing.
Right.
I think that was a biggie.
And I think you're right. And I think the fact that even the police say that, they during this time that they tracked Scott and he drove to that marina 3 times in early January, and he would look out over that water in that marina out on that bay. So, and the police were out there searching that area, and he found himself over there and out looking. It just seems like, he was watching. Is today the day they're going to find it? Is this the day that, I'm going to have to turn up my alibi, my defense,
right. And that's one thing we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
The number of subsequent trips.
Yeah. Different visits that he makes.
Yeah. And also I think it's out there that he was keeping an eye on that area. He was asking people about that area.
When someone comes to you and talks about something, that
what their intentions are, what they're trying to.
Right. We can weed through and go, here's somebody that sounds like they're probably guilty of something.
Right. Or, they're fishing for information.
Or they're fishing for information. Yeah. So I think, and he's doing this, and he's bringing up stories about how he came across other fishermen in the bay and talked to them that day. Of course, the police can't find these fishermen, that he's talking about. But he's acting like they're there all the time. But yet when it comes time to find them, they can't find the fishermen to produce in court. To me, he's the ultimate, and I've been in sales a big chunk of my adult life. Sales people are great, man. They're the forefront of the country. They make things happen.
And you are a bullshit artist, too.
And I am that, too.
You can be.
Yeah. He is the biggest salesman And this is his biggest sell. Right now, the murder of Lacey and the unborn is his biggest sales job. And he is really trying to turn it on with the BS. And he holds that all the way through.
Right.
I mean, he never lets up on the sell.
The interesting thing on Facebook recently, since we announced that we were going to do the Scott Peterson story, and then once we released episode 1, there was a lot of messaging back and forth on Facebook. One person in particular, and I wish I could remember her name because I'd give her a shout out for it, but we had this conversation about that you could almost look at what he does in this scenario as being worse than some of these big time serial killers.
Yeah.
And that people may find that strange for me to say that. You can look at BTK, who killed many, many more people, right? He killed 10 altogether. But what Scott Peterson did, or what he was convicted of doing, let me put it that way, killing his wife, very intimate. I mean, that's the person that you're supposed to protect and love for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Killing your unborn child.
Mutilates them.
Yeah, you can make an argument that that's much worse.
I think it is.
Than some of these other serial killers that, not that it's not bad what they do.
All of it's bad.
It's all bad.
Right.
But we were having this conversation, and the person, we both kind of came to this realization that because of the intimacy of what happened and the brutality, that this is pretty much, it's basically worse than what BTK did.
I mean, when you go to bed tonight,
and I don't want to piss people off about, especially victims of
no, and I think you're right.
Family of victims of BTK.
When you go to bed tonight and your wife's laying next to you, you think that you should be able to close your eyes and go off to La La Land.
Well, and she should too, without having any reservation. That
she probably has a little reservation because
the
stuff that you research and love to talk about.
I do spend a lot of time talking about.
Yeah, she probably should be a little concerned, not a lot, but just a little bit. Versus, someone busting through the door right now and shooting you. You don't expect that. You don't know the person, but to know the person and for them to do something terrible to you, I mean, it's a different level.
Yeah, so I do want to make that clear because I don't want to get a bunch of nasty messages that all of these murders that we talk about, they're heinous.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that you and I try really hard to do is show compassion for the victims and the victims' families, and try not to glorify the killers or the accused. So I really don't want to demean or not. That's not.
No, we're not lessening the.
Yeah, I don't want to lessen what some of these other people did. It's just the intimacy of this case.
I mean, this is a spouse.
Yeah,
you marry somebody thinking.
Well, and an unborn child.
Yeah, and I can't even.
That's horrible.
That's when you talk about babies and kids. We talked about Huckabee. That crime that that it just tears me up.
Yeah.
So, but in this case, he was Peterson was the ultimate sales job here. He sold everybody in his life on it wasn't him. Tried to sell it to Amber,
and he did it for a pretty good while, right? He had
he
had the Roca family behind him.
Yep.
We talked about that in episode 1. He had Amber Fry completely fooled for a period of time before she realized that his wife was missing and started, working with the police.
Clearly, a lot of women found him attractive. He had early on a lot of, I don't want to call it fan mail, but he had a lot of female followers that would write him in prison, that would send him pictures in prison, in jail. Not prison, but in jail.
That seems like it happens a lot. That there are a lot of females attracted to, like Richard Ramirez, and we're going to definitely cover him, the Night Stalker, at some point. That guy got so much fan mail from admirers.
And I think
it's crazy.
It's not the the bad boy thing that a lot of women say that they're attracted to the bad boy. This is a whole different level.
Yeah.
So
That's not bad boy. That is horrible, crazy man.
But he has this following. No doubt about it. He was nice. I hate even talking good about him, but he was a good looking guy. I guess because Lacey was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure at one point, the guy probably wasn't. I don't know that he did anything horrible before this.
Yeah, I don't know what. Well, besides the adultery.
Well, adultery, yeah.
I don't know
which is horrible. But
what caused him to cross that line? Besides the fact that as we discussed before, he wanted to be with Amber.
Well, and so that leads us into talking a little bit about motive, right? So I think the prosecution would present that it was his affair with Fry that was a motive, right? He wanted to be rid of his wife and soon be. I don't think he wanted to be a dad. I think I read a few things that I don't know if he had expressed that or he was feeling trapped but I think there was a part of him that wanted to be with Amber Fry.
Right. And he had made comments to previous girls on the side that he didn't wish to have any children.
Yeah. And I think the other big motive that they put out there, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to play that news clip, was the life insurance policy, because there was definitely some talk about them being in debt, or him especially racking up some debt.
Right.
And so that life insurance policy would obviously get him out of that situation. We're going to I want to talk about his sentencing, and I want to talk about his appeal.
Right.
But one of the things that I found, and if you can say that there's something good that came out of this, which is a hard thing to say, but the death of Lacey and Connor, it did lead to Congress passing the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, and it's widely known as Lacey and Connor's Law. And that was passed in 2004. Sharon Roca and her boyfriend Ron Gransky, which we heard in the 911 tape that started off episode 1, they were at the White House. George W. Bush signed this bill into law, and it basically recognizes unborn children as legal victims if injured or killed during a listed crime of violence. So I don't know how it was classified before that.
Right.
And maybe that is why they could only push the second degree charge for the fetus, because they couldn't prove that, or because they knew it didn't go full term. So now if you kill an unborn child,
it could be prosecuted the
as
right
first
way.
degree. That's what I took from this. So,
right.
I don't know that you can ever say something good comes from something this heinous, but it is definitely something that should have been on the books before. It's sad that it took this heinous crime to get it there,
right. But they got it there, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. So, we talked about the jury returning the verdict of death for Scott, and he was formally sentenced March 16th, 2005. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The judge, as he should have, has laid into him pretty good, called Scott cruel, heartless, callous, and he ordered him to pay $10,000 towards the cost of Lacey's funeral. How much solace Lacey's family took in that, and that doesn't seem like a whole. And maybe he didn't have a lot of money. I don't know.
Peterson?
Yeah. Well, he had $15,000 in cash. Why is the judge only ordering him to pay $10,000?
Well, and his family raised over $1 million for the attorney.
Right. So and maybe that's all the judge had authority to.
Maybe that was it. That was just
the Rocas, I'm sure went after.
I'm just trying to figure out
in a civil trial
who donated to his defense. Why?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because if you go on Facebook or certain websites, there are a lot of people that think Scott Peterson is innocent. When I post the episodes as they come out, when I posted episode 1 on Facebook, in the comments, there was a person that definitely said that they would be glad when the real killer of Lacey and Connor was caught.
So who do they think the real killer is?
Didn't say.
I'd like to know that.
Didn't say.
Post that.
And this person wasn't malicious.
No.
Didn't say anything
I get that.
mean.
I'm just curious, because
But
the evidence is pretty strong, even though it's circumstantial.
and I think that's probably why there are a lot of people that have some doubt to his guilt, is because it is pretty much all circumstantial, and you can convict somebody on circumstantial evidence alone.
Well, clearly
there just was a ton of it,
right?
And it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together.
It's just really nothing solid that would tell you otherwise. Didn't push you to the direction of this Donnie guy or this, this cult possibility.
Right.
It just,
But I thought that was interesting, because now there's way more people making comments that, this guy was a piece of shit. I hope he fries in hell. I mean, there's tons of those comments.
Right.
But there were a number of comments that led me down a few rabbit holes to different websites and different Facebook pages that are certainly in the camp that Scott Peterson is innocent, and they're still out looking for the true killers of Lacey and Connor.
Well, I know that when he was sentenced, Lacey's mom, she did read and made some comments at the sentencing, which she's allowed to do. They allow that. And, one of the critical points in that is that she actually read and made a comment basically saying something to the effect that, imagine, your unborn son, Connor, being murdered, and Connor asking you, Daddy, why are you killing Mommy and me? And I guess basically there was not a dry eye in there, except for, Peterson was unemotional about it. But the way she read it,
dude, I'm about ready to tear up right now.
It just
thinking about
her, hear her voice. I'm sure it was crackling.
Oh,
when she
was
was
grieving.
Yeah, and she's saying, "This is Connor, as you're murdering, as he's being murdered. He's saying, Daddy, why are you killing Mommy and me?"
And I know I've talked about this on a lot of episodes. People are probably going to get tired of me saying it. But one thing that we do a lot is we analyze how we think people are supposed to act.
Right.
Right. We do that from 911 calls to how they act in the courtroom. But I don't care whether you didn't murder, you did murder. How can you not show any emotion? Because either way, your wife and son are dead.
Absolutely. Show some of that raw emotion,
right?
Man.
I don't know how you can hold it back unless you are a psychopath, which
and you disassociate yourself with it all.
Is incapable of showing any empathy.
Like we heard in BTK's trial tapes,
I don't know that Scott was a psychopath, but for him to, I don't, even if he's innocent, he never showed any emotion. I never saw it.
Right.
He tried, what looked like fake tears in some of the interviews and things that we watched, but I don't know.
Yeah, just the raw emotion for me.
On March 17th, 2005, Peterson arrives at San Quentin State Prison. He joined the other inmates in the only, I think that's the only death row facility in California, which seems strange because California is pretty big.
Right.
And I think really we have to jump all the way to 2012 because I used to have a really hard time about this. And I don't know what you think, Mike, about how long it takes for somebody to be executed. I'm not, in no way am I against the death penalty. But in the past, I've always had a hard time figuring out why it took 20 years or whatever it was. But now if you look at a lot of these cases where people are being exonerated by DNA evidence.
Right. Now it makes sense a little
Now
bit.
It starts to make a little sense, although you hate as a taxpayer to be paying for these people to eat and sleep and
sure.
do whatever for 20 years.
I mean, if you just want to talk costs real fast, I mean, the initial trial up to the point where he got sentenced, not any of the appeals, none of that stuff. Just up to that point was, just over $4 million to the county.
Yeah.
That the county residents had to pay for that to go on.
Yeah.
Cost them a little more than $4 million.
Which is crazy, but that's our justice system. And if I was in that seat and I hadn't done anything, I'd be wanting to have, for me, afforded all those opportunities. So, but anyway, I've kind of changed. I guess what I was saying is I've changed my thinking a little bit, just because there have been, now with DNA technology, there have been so many exonerations that it does make a little more sense maybe to.
So you're saying it warrants?
I don't know about 20 years, but 30
warrants
years.
some time frame
Yes.
before, but not these 30, been on death row for 30 years.
Right. Well, in the old days, they'd just hang you or shoot you or whatever it was.
Well, they had it right in the Wild West.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they got it wrong now and then.
But nobody knew about it because
That's right.
there was no DNA or there was nothing
They quickly buried you.
to come back. But so we got to get up to, before we close this out, 2012, they're still filing appeals on Scott's behalf. At this time, his lawyer is a man named Cliff Gardner, and he actually files an appeal that's 423 pages. I don't know if that sounds big.
Sounds like bedside table reading.
It's what I read before I go to bed.
Yeah.
Basically, what he cites in there is that the jury was, affected by all the publicity that was hostile towards Scott Peterson. The case was flimsy, as we talked about, relied pretty much solely on circumstantial evidence. As you would expect, the state attorney files their response. In November 2015, the defense files something else. They file a habeas corpus petition claiming that a juror lied on her jury application and that there was evidence that neighbors saw Lacey Peterson alive after Scott left home. So, I mean, there's still things going on
Right.
well after, so what, he was sent to prison in 2005. So 10 years later, they're still working through that appeals process. And obviously nothing has come to fruition. He's still, to my knowledge, on death row and
Right.
will be until the day he dies, unless there's some blockbuster bombshell like we've seen in some of these other cases. But I just
think
don't
he'll
see
end
it.
up dying in prison. I don't think that they're going to rush to get this to follow through on the death sentencing part. That's just my opinion. Pretty liberal state, so I just don't see that occurring.
It's a fascinating case. There's a lot of layers to it.
Oh, like we've talked, you could go on in different directions with this case. Like you said, we could talk about the jurors, and the issues with the jurors.
More about the phone calls
more
and
the phone calls.
the Fry relationship. And it's something that you and I always talk about when we're selecting a case and starting out is how much detail is too much detail. Most of the comments that we have received, and we love comments, everybody, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, doesn't matter. We love your comments. But I think most of the comments that we've gotten have been in favor of the detail.
Right.
Now, it can probably get sloggy and slow at times when you're dealing with so much detail, but that's what I've taken away from the comments, that they like the fact that we get into the mud as much as we do.
Get little details, get some Gibby facts mixed in with it.
Yeah.
But
what that leads to is, in some of the bigger cases, this is a two-parter. Some of the big, Dahmer, Gacy, you're looking at probably at least 3.
Yeah.
When we get there.
Dahmer's going to put a hurting on me because I won't be able to eat meat for a while.
I know. But anyway, I'll speak for Gibby that we just really appreciate everyone that takes the time to download and listen. Our numbers have really increased at a rate that we never expected. And we love hearing all your comments on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and the interaction. The one thing I would say is if you like the show and you're using the iPhone, definitely go out to iTunes and give us a rating. The review is optional, but the rating really helps us move up the ranks, and it helps other people when they're doing searches for true crime podcasts. So, Mike, is there anything else you got?
No, I really like the memes. I know we had another meme the other day.
We need more memes.
Is it meme?
I think it's meme.
M-E-M-E?
You and I are old, but we need these younger people to send in more memes.
That's right.
Speaking of memes, I've got to give a shout out to Sarah Beth for her Tyrone Biggums. Y'all got more podcast meme? That was hilarious. One of the funniest ones we've had. Thank you, Sarah Beth, so much. All right, guys. Well, we're wrapping up the second part of Scott Peterson. We appreciate it. As always, stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Inspired by the hit Wondery podcast Against the Odds comes the gripping guidebook, How to Survive Against the Odds, Tales and Tips for Animal Attacks and Natural Disasters. This might just be the most important book you'll ever read. Go inside life or death situations where everyday people survived nature's most extreme scenarios, and learn how you can too. In these tales, you'll hear about the grit, willpower, and know-how needed to endure shipwrecks, alligator attacks, earthquakes, and more. You'll learn from experts, including top doctors, about what happens to your body and mind in life-threatening situations. Plus, important tips on what to do, and equally important, what not to do when faced with a situation that is truly against the odds. Go to survivalguidebook.com to pre-order How to Survive Against the Odds today and get the perfect gift in time for graduation and Father's Day.